There is a lie you have been told about pain, that it is an interruption, an accident, a thing that happens to you on the way to the life you were supposed to have. And so you have spent years trying to build a life where nothing hard can ever reach you. But look at what actually made you. Not the easy seasons, not the years when everything went to plan. Look at the fire, the loss, the blow you did not see coming. Everything you actually respect about yourself was made in the exact place you were trying to escape. 2,500 years ago, in a workshop of soot and heat, men understood something we have forgotten, that you cannot make anything worth holding without violence. Take raw iron, brittle, useless, worth nothing, and you cannot argue it into becoming a blade. You cannot reason with it. You cannot ask it nicely. You must put it in the fire, and then strike it, and then freeze it, and then grind it, and then burn it again. 6 stages, each one worse than the last. And at the end of them, something that can cut through the world. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual physical process. And it is the most exact map of human character ever discovered. Every stage of the forge has a twin in your life. Every one of them has already happened to you or is coming. And in each of them, an ancient philosopher who lived it and left us the instructions. The fire. Seneca, exiled to a rock in the sea, on why suffering is sent to you. The hammer. Epictetus, born a slave, on the one thing no one can ever take. The quench. Zeno, who lost everything in a single shipwreck and called it the luckiest day of his life. The edge. Cleanthes, mocked as the slowest man in Athens, who ground his way to the top. The temper. Cato, the most unbreakable man in Rome, and how that destroyed him. The blade. Marcus Aurelius, the finished weapon, drawn and used, and never allowed to rest. 6 stages, 1 blade. This is the complete series, and when you reach the end of it, you will understand exactly what has been happening to you your entire life, and what it was for. You are the iron. Let's begin. There is a moment in every furnace when the metal begins to glow. Not red, not yet. A dull, dirty orange, the color of something being broken down at the level it was built. And here is the strange part. The blacksmith is not trying to destroy it. He is paying very close attention to the exact thing that looks like ruin. Because he knows something the metal does not. He knows that everything the blade will ever be, its edge, its strength, the way it holds a line under pressure, is being decided right now, in the fire, in the part that hurts. So, let me ask you something before we begin. What if the worst season of your life was not the thing happening to you, but the thing happening for you? Hold that question. We are going to earn the answer. 2,000 years ago, a Roman wrote 4 words that have outlived every empire since. Ignis aurum probat. Fire tests gold. The man was Seneca, statesman, playwright, one of the richest men in Rome. And he was writing to answer a question that still keeps people awake at 3 in the morning. If the universe has any order to it at all, any justice, any meaning, then why do good people suffer? Why does the decent man lose the job? Why does the honest one get betrayed? Why does the fire always seem to find the people who least deserve it? Seneca's answer was not comfort. It was almost the opposite. He said, "You have it backwards. The fire does not find the good man by accident. It is sent to him on purpose." Picture a general. He has 1,000 soldiers under his command, and one mission that could get a man killed. Who does he send? Not the weakest. Not the one he doubts. He sends his best. The one he trusts to come back. The one the hard task was practically made for. That, Seneca said, is what hardship is. Not a punishment handed to the cursed. An assignment handed to the capable. The trial is not proof that life has turned against you. It is proof that you are being asked to carry something heavier than most. He had a word for the ones who never struggle, the ones cushioned from every blow, who never once feel the heat. He did not call them lucky, he called them unproven. Like gold that has never seen the furnace, you simply cannot know what it is worth. And there is a quieter line underneath all of this, easy to miss. Seneca was not telling you to enjoy the fire. He never said the pain was good. He said the pain was useful. Those are not the same thing, and the difference is the whole point. Now, it is one thing to write about fire from a warm room. So here is what most people never tell you about Seneca. He did not learn this in a library. In the year 41, he was accused of a crime he very likely did not commit. The politics were ugly, the charge convenient, the outcome decided before it began. And he was exiled, not to somewhere gentle, to Corsica, a rock in the sea, far from Rome, far from his name, far from everyone he loved. For 8 years. Sit with that. The man who would one day write "Fire tests gold" spent the better part of a decade as the metal in the furnace. No audience, no status, no certainty he would ever go home. We tend to imagine the philosopher as someone above it all, calm, untouched, dispensing wisdom from a height. But the truth is harder and far more useful. Seneca wrote about surviving the fire because he had been left in it. The words were not a theory. They were a wound, healed over, made into something that could hold an edge. Now come forward 2,000 years, to us. Because we have built something Seneca never could have imagined. A world engineered, end to end, to keep the fire away from you. Cold air on demand. Food without hunger. A glowing rectangle that erases boredom the second it appears. Every sharp edge of existence, sanded down, padded, removed. And we call this progress. And in many ways, it is. But something gets lost in a life with no heat in it. We have produced, perhaps for the first time in history, a generation of gold that has never seen the furnace. Comfortable, safe, and quietly terrified of the smallest discomfort. Because here is the cost. No one prints on the box. A blade that is never tempered stays soft. A person who is never tested never finds out what they are made of. And we do not have to imagine what happens to a thing that is never made to resist. We can watch it. Take a healthy man and put him in a hospital bed, not sick, not injured, simply still. Within weeks, his muscles begin to waste, his bones grow thin, his heart, with so little left to push against, weakens by the day. Nothing attacked him. The damage came from the absence of resistance, from having nothing to push back against. The body does not keep its strength as a gift. It keeps strength only for as long as something demands it. Take the demand away, and the strength quietly leaves. And what is true of the body is true of the man. Strip every obstacle out of a life, every struggle, every weight, every cold morning you would rather not face. And you have not done that person a kindness. You have put them in the bed, comfortable, cared for, and growing weaker by the day, in the exact place their strength was meant to live. And the fire you spend your whole life avoiding, as Seneca says, is the only thing that could have shown you your own strength. So let us go back to that furnace, to the metal glowing dull orange in the part that looks like ruin. Remember the question, what if the worst season of your life was not the thing happening to you, but the thing happening for you? Here is the answer. Seneca spent 8 years on a rock in the sea, learning to give. The fire was never trying to destroy you. The fire is how the shape gets in. Steel does not become a blade in spite of the flame. It becomes a blade because of it. The heat is not the enemy of the edge. The heat is the price of the edge. And every hard thing you are carrying right now, the loss, the setback, the season that brought you here, is not evidence that you have been abandoned. It is the furnace, and you are the metal. And the only real question was never why is this happening to me? It was always, what am I going to become because of it? The blacksmith never panics at the glow. He has seen it 1,000 times. He knows the fire is not the end of the metal. It is the beginning of the blade. Ignis aurum probat. Fire tests gold. Let it test you. This was the first stage. The fire. The raw material meeting the heat. But fire alone shapes nothing. What comes next is the part most people never survive, when the heat is not enough and the blows begin. That is the hammer. And that is where we go next. The fire finishes nothing. It only makes the metal willing, soft, glowing, ready to be moved. And then the fire steps back, and something that looks far worse arrives. The hammer. It falls once, then again, then again. Each blow a small, deliberate violence. And the metal has no say in it. No say in when the blows come, or how hard, or how many. But here is the part that should stop you. The blacksmith is not angry. He is not punishing the steel. Every single strike is placed, chosen, aimed. So, let me ask you something. What is the difference between a blow that breaks a man and a blow that shapes him? Because from the outside, they look exactly the same. Hold that. We are going to earn it. Nearly 2,000 years ago, in a Roman household, there was a boy who did not own his own name. We call him Epictetus. But that was not a name he was given at birth. It was a label. In Greek, it means, roughly, acquired, gained, property, a thing that was bought. He was born a slave, and for the first part of his life, he was owned by a powerful man in Nero's Rome. Think about what that means. Every blow of his early life was chosen by someone else. Where he went, what he did, what was done to him. He did not hold the hammer. He was under it. And of all the people in history who might have had the right to say, life has ruined me, he had a stronger case than almost anyone. But that is not the story he told. Because somewhere under all of it, Epictetus worked out a single distinction. The most important one he would ever make. He divided the whole of existence into two piles. In the first pile, everything that is not up to you. What happens? What other people do? Your reputation, your body, whether the blow falls. And in the second pile, something much smaller, but it was his. What he did with it, his judgment, his response. The thing he chose to become in the moment after the strike. The master owned his body. The master could command his hours, his labor, even his pain. But there was one room the master could never enter. The room where Epictetus alone decided what the blow would mean. He was not free to stop the hammer. Nobody is. But inside that one room, he was freer than the man holding it. Hold on to that room. Everything is going to come back to it. Now, there is a story about Epictetus that has followed him for 2,000 years. I will tell it to you the way it comes down to us. But treat it gently, because it may be more legend than fact. They say that one day his master took hold of his leg and began to twist it. And Epictetus calmly, without heat, said, "If you keep going, you will break it." The master kept going, and the leg broke. And Epictetus, still calm, is supposed to have said only, "There, I told you it would break." Now, historians argue about whether that ever happened. What is not in doubt is that he was lame for the rest of his life. He walked with difficulty until the day he died. But hold the picture for a moment anyway, because it survives for a reason. A man under the hammer of another man's cruelty, and the only thing he insists on keeping is his composure. Not because the pain did not matter, but because his response was the one thing in the entire room that still belonged to him. He would not hand it over. Even that, even then. Eventually, Epictetus was freed, and a freed slave with a crippled leg and no fortune did something remarkable with the rest of his life. He taught, he owned almost nothing. He wrote almost nothing down. Everything we have, a student scribbled from his lectures. There is a small story he liked to tell against himself. He once owned an iron lamp. A thief took it in the night, and instead of raging, he simply noted the lesson, that he had loved the lamp more than it deserved. So the next day, he bought an earthenware one. Cheaper, easier to lose. A small thing, almost funny. But look at what it shows. Blow after blow, slavery, a broken body, exile, theft, and each time the same quiet motion. This is not mine to control. But my response is, again, and again, and again. Now come forward to us. Because we have quietly decided something Epictetus would have found very strange. We have decided that the blows themselves are the problem. We have built a world that treats discomfort as an emergency. A hard feeling arrives, and we reach instantly for something to make it stop. We have confused "I feel bad" with "something has gone wrong," and so we flinch from boredom, from silence, from difficulty, from the smallest strike. But here is what no one tells you. You cannot hammer nothing into something, and your own body already knows this, even if your mind has forgotten. Strike a hand with honest work day after day, and it does not wear away. It builds a callus, new, harder skin, grown precisely where the blows keep landing. Load a bone until it aches, and it answers by laying down more bone, exactly along the line of the strain. The body reinforces itself at the very point where it is struck. That is not damage, that is design. And the hand that grips nothing, the bone that carries nothing, stays soft, stays thin, and gives way the first time it is finally tested. A life with no blows in it is not a life that has been spared. It is a life that has never been shaped. The person who has fled every hard thing has not protected themselves. They have only stayed soft, still glowing maybe, still full of potential, but formless, waiting for a shape that never comes. So let us go back to the anvil, to the hammer falling, again and again. Remember the question: what is the difference between a blow that breaks a man and a blow that shapes him? Here it is. It was never the blow. Two men can take the identical strike. One shatters, one sharpens. The difference is not what landed on them. The difference is what they did in the half second after. That half second, that is the room. The one the master could never enter. Epictetus could not choose the hammer. Neither can you. The loss will come. The betrayal, the setback, the cruelty you did not deserve. It will come. You do not get a vote on that. But the half second after, that is yours. It has always been yours. And here is the part almost everyone misses. One blow shapes nothing. A single strike on cold steel is just noise. It is the 10,000th blow, each one met the same way, in that same half second, that finally makes the blade. That is what discipline actually is. Not one heroic moment. The same response, chosen again, and again, and again, until it is no longer a choice, until it is no longer something you do, but something you are. The hammer does not fall once, it falls 1,000 times, and the shape was never hidden in any single blow. It was hidden in the pattern of all of them. So when the strikes come, and they are coming, do not ask the hammer to stop. Ask only this: what am I going to do in the half-second after? Because that half-second is the only thing you have ever truly owned. The fire made you willing. The hammer is making you a shape. But shape is not the end. Shape can still be lost. Everything the hammer has given can slip away in an instant, unless it is set, made permanent, locked in. And steel is only ever set by one thing. Something sudden, something cold, something that feels, in the moment, like death. That is the quench. And that is where we go next. The blade is finished, or so it looks. The fire has softened it. The hammer has given it a shape. Hours of heat, thousands of blows. Everything the steel will ever be is finally there, glowing on the anvil. And now the blacksmith does something that makes no sense at all. He lifts the blade he has spent all day creating, carries it to a barrel of cold, black water, and plunges it in. A scream of steam. A shock so violent the metal cries out. And here is what they don't tell you. Sometimes in that instant, the blade cracks. Everything the fire built, everything the hammer shaped, destroyed in less than a second. The smith knows this. He knows the risk. And he plunges it in anyway. So let me ask you something. Why would he gamble everything he made on one sudden moment of cold? And when that moment comes for you, because it is coming, what decides whether it sets you or shatters you? Hold that. We are going to earn it. 23 centuries ago, there was a merchant from Cyprus. His name was Zeno, and by every measure his world had, Zeno had won. He came from money. He traded in one of the most precious cargoes of the ancient world. The purple dye of Phoenicia. A color so rare, so ruinously expensive that kings wore it and almost no one else could. Picture him, a man in his prime, wealth in the hold beneath his feet, his fortune moving wherever he moved. One good voyage from being richer still, and somewhere on the water between Phoenicia and Greece, the sea decided otherwise. We do not know the storm's name. We do not know the hour. We only know what was true by the end of it. The ship was gone. The cargo gone. The fortune Zeno had spent his life building, on the seabed, unreachable, as lost as if it had never existed. One day, one plunge, and everything the fire of his ambition had built, everything the hammer of his work had shaped, gone. He washed up near Athens with, as far as the story goes, little more than the life in his body, not ruined slowly, with time to adjust, ruined suddenly, the way the quench comes for steel, no warning, no negotiation, just heat, and then cold. Now, what happens next comes down to us from ancient biographers, writing long after. So hold it gently, but hold it, because it survives, for a reason. They say Zeno wandered into Athens with nowhere to be. A man whose entire identity, merchant, trader, man of fortune, had drowned with his ship. And at some point he drifted into a bookshop, maybe for shelter, maybe just for somewhere to stand. The bookseller was reading aloud. The words were about Socrates, a man who had owned almost nothing, feared almost nothing, and needed almost nothing. And something in the ruined merchant went very still. He listened for a long time. Then he asked the bookseller one question, and it may be the most important question anyone has ever asked in a shop. Where can I find a man like that? At that exact moment, so the story goes, a philosopher named Crates happened to be passing the doorway. The bookseller pointed, "Follow him." And Zeno did. The merchant never went back to sea. Years later, he began teaching on a painted porch in Athens, a stoa in Greek. The people who gathered there were named for that porch. We call them the Stoics. The entire philosophy, the one Seneca wrote in exile, the one Epictetus lived in chains, every word of it traces back to this. One ruined man, one shipwreck, one question in a bookshop. Zeno said something about that shipwreck years later. It is recorded by the old biographers, so take the wording gently, but the meaning is his. I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck. Sit with how strange that sentence is. Not, I recovered from the shipwreck. Not, I survived it. Prosperous. The single worst day of his life, reclassified as the most valuable. Because here is what the sudden cold does, that nothing else can. The fire teaches you, slowly. The hammer shapes you, gradually. But everything they give you stays soft, right up until the moment it is tested by shock. A shape that has never been through the plunge is a shape that can still be lost, comfortable, promising, and unproven at the exact point that matters. The quench is the moment the softness ends. And here is the unsettling part. From the outside, no one can tell which blades will survive it. Not the smith, not the steel, not until the water. Now come forward to us, because we have organized our entire world around one promise, that the plunge will never come. Insurance for the ship, backups for the backups, a plan for every storm. We have engineered a life where nothing is ever supposed to be lost suddenly, and still it comes. The phone call, the diagnosis, the redundancy email sent at 4 p.m. on a Friday. The person who was there and then is not. No warning, no negotiation, just heat and then cold. And here is the irony we have forgotten. The glass screen in your hand right now, the one you may be watching this on, survives being dropped for one reason. Someone shocked it, on purpose. Heated it, then cooled it so suddenly that the surface locked solid under permanent tension. Engineers call it tempering. The smith would call it the quench. We build our devices to survive the sudden shock, and our lives, never to meet one. And because we built our lives on the promise that this moment would never arrive, we meet it with the one response guaranteed to break us. We call it the end of the plan, the end of the identity, the end of who we were. Zeno stood on a shore with his entire life on the seabed, and what he found in that cold was not an ending. It was the only moment strong enough to show him what he actually was, once everything he had was gone. So let us go back to the barrel, to the blade plunging into the black water, the scream of steam. Remember the question. What decides whether the sudden cold sets you or shatters you? Here is the answer the smith has always known. The quench decides nothing. It reveals. The blade that cracks in the water was always going to crack. The flaw was already in the metal, hidden, waiting. The cold did not create it. The cold found it. And the blade that survives, the cold locks in everything the fire and the hammer gave it. In 1 second, the shape becomes permanent. The softness ends, the hardness stays. Same barrel, same water, same shock. The difference was never the crisis. The difference was what the metal was made of by the time the crisis came. That is why the fire mattered. That is why every blow mattered. Not for their own sake, but because they were deciding in advance what the cold would find in you. You do not become someone in the moment everything is lost. You discover, in one sudden, freezing instant, who all those quiet years were making you. Zeno lost everything in one plunge, and the cold did not find a flaw. It found a man the fire had already been forging. He simply had not met him yet. So, When your plunge comes, and it is coming, it will not ask if you are ready. It will only reveal whether you are. And if the water finds a crack in you, hear this part carefully. Watch what the smith does with broken steel. He does not throw it away. He carries it back to the fire and begins the forging again. A crack was never proof that you were worthless, only proof that you are not finished. The fire is still there. It has never stopped burning. I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck. The fire made you willing. The hammer made you a shape. The quench made it permanent. But a hard blade is not yet a useful one. Hardness without refinement is just a heavy piece of steel. What comes next is slower, quieter, almost invisible. The long grinding that turns hard metal into something that can actually cut. That is the edge, and that is where we go next. The blade comes out of the water hard, harder than it has ever been, harder than it will ever be again, and everyone standing around the forge thinks the same thing. It's finished. Then the smith runs his thumb along the edge and feels nothing, no bite, no catch, no danger. The hardest the steel will ever be, and it cannot cut a single thing. So here is the question. Why is the hardest blade still useless? And why does the one thing that finally makes it cut look, to everyone watching, like the most pointless, boring work in the world? Hold that. We are going to earn it. 23 centuries ago, a young man walked into Athens with almost nothing in his pockets. The old accounts say 4 drachmas, barely enough to eat. His name was Cleanthes. And before Athens, he had been a boxer, a fighter, a body built for taking hits, not for thinking. He came to study philosophy under Zeno, the same Zeno who had lost everything in a shipwreck and built a school from the wreckage. But Cleanthes was not the promising one. He was slow, not stupid, slow. He took longer than everyone else to understand a thing. The quick students grasped an idea in a single afternoon and moved on, pleased with themselves. Cleanthes would still be sitting with it days later, turning it over, refusing to let go until he truly had it. They laughed at him for it. Here was the raw block of steel that walked into the forge looking like it would never become anything at all. Hard, maybe, stubborn, certainly, but blunt. Now here is what Cleanthes actually did with his days and his nights. He had no money. So to afford the lessons, he worked. While Athens slept, he carried water, bucket after bucket drawn from wells in the dark, poured into gardens for a few coins. He ground grain by hand for a woman who paid him a little for the labor, all night. And then, exhausted, he went to sit at the feet of Zeno and learn philosophy all day. Then back to the water, and the grain, and the dark, for years, not weeks, not months, years of it. The other students had a nickname for him. They called him the donkey, the ass, the beast of burden, too plodding to be brilliant, too dull to shine. And here is the first extraordinary thing about the man. He took the name and kept it, gladly. Because, he said, only a donkey could carry the load Zeno put on his back. Only he could bear the full weight of what was being taught and not put it down. The clever ones traveled light. They took the ideas that flattered them and left the rest. Cleanthes carried all of it, every day, up the hill and back. That is what the whetstone actually is. Not a lightning strike of genius, the same slow, grinding pass. Over the stone, again and again and again. There is a story about Cleanthes from this time, and it comes to us from the old biographers, so hold it gently, but hold it, because it tells you exactly who he was. The city authorities noticed something that did not add up. Here was a man, strong and healthy, spending his days sitting in a philosophy school, producing nothing, earning nothing that anyone could see. So they summoned him before the court, the Areopagus. "Explain yourself," they said. "How does a man with no visible income stay alive? What are you hiding?" The implication was ugly. They thought he must be a thief, or worse, And Cleanthes did not argue. He did not make a speech. He simply asked the court to call 2 witnesses. The first, the gardener whose plots he watered every single night. The second, the woman whose grain he ground before dawn. They came. They told the court the truth. This man works harder than almost anyone in Athens. He simply does it in the dark, where no one thinks to look, so that he can spend his days becoming something. And the court was so moved by what they heard that they offered him money, a gift, from the city. Cleanthes refused it. The way the story goes, Zeno would not let him take it, not out of pride, but because the whole point had been to earn it himself, to grind it out, to need no rescue. Sit with that image for a moment. A man dragged into court and treated like a criminal, whose only crime was doing the most patient, invisible, unglamorous work in the entire city. So let us go back to the blade, hard and blunt and useless. Because now we can say what the edge actually is. Hardness, on its own, is nothing. A thick, hard bar of steel is just a club, heavy, blunt. It can bludgeon, but it cannot cut. The edge is what makes hardness useful. And here is the strange truth about how an edge is made. You do not add anything to the steel, you take away. The whetstone removes metal, a few microns with every single pass. A little more of what is not the edge, gone. And the maddening part, the part that breaks almost everyone, is that you cannot see it happening. Run the blade across the stone once, and it looks exactly the same as before. 10 times, the same, 100 times, still to the eye. Nothing. There is no single stroke where the edge appears, no dramatic moment, no flash. The sharpness is hiding in the aggregate, in the thousands of identical boring passes, each one removing almost nothing until one day the blade will part a falling hair. That is why Cleanthes matters. He was not the sharp one. He was the one willing to be ground. Now come forward to us, because we have fallen in love with exactly the wrong thing. We worship the naturals, the prodigies, the overnight success. We share the highlight reel, the finished blade, gleaming, catching the light, and we never once show the whetstone. We have become a people who want the sharpness without the sharpening. We start things, and when the first week brings no visible result, we decide we must not have the talent for it, and we quit. We mistake slow for failing. But here is what almost no one tells you. And it is not philosophy, it is biology. When you practice a skill, anything, a language, an instrument, a craft, something physical happens inside your brain. Each time you repeat the action, the pathway that carries that signal gets wrapped, a little at a time, in a layer of insulation. Researchers call it myelin. The more you repeat, the thicker that wrapping grows. And the thicker it grows, the faster and cleaner the signal fires. You are not getting the hang of it. You are physically rewiring yourself, laying down insulation, micron by micron, and there is no download for it, no shortcut, no hack, because it is not information, it is construction. And construction takes the number of passes it takes, the people you call naturals. Most of them simply did their grinding somewhere you weren't looking, in the dark, carrying water. So let us go back to the question, why is the hardest blade still useless? And why does the thing that finally makes it cut look so unbearably boring? Here it is. An edge is not added. An edge is revealed. The whetstone does not paint sharpness onto the steel. It removes everything that is not the edge, one patient pass at a time, until only the edge is left. And the stone does not care whether you are gifted. It does not care whether you are quick or clever or the kind of person others expect great things from. It asks one question, and only one. Will you come back to it again? The quick students of Athens, the sharp ones, the brilliant ones who laughed at the donkey. Most of their names are gone. They flashed and they faded. And Cleanthes, the slow one, the water carrier, ground himself against the stone of daily effort for nearly 20 years, and then took Zeno's place, became the head of the entire school, led the Stoics for more than 30 years after that. The plodding one carried the whole tradition forward on his back, exactly as he said a donkey would. So understand what talent actually is. Talent is the raw block, nothing more. The edge, the part that finally cuts, is not something you are born holding. It is something you grind. And slow was never the enemy of sharp. Slow is how sharp is made. Run your thumb along the blade now, the same steel that felt like nothing, and feel it catch, it bites, it holds. It is, at last, dangerous, not because it grew harder, but because it was patiently, invisibly refined. The fire made you willing. The hammer made you a shape. The quench made you hard. And the long, unglamorous grinding of the stone, the water carried in the dark, the reps no one saw, that is what finally gave you an edge. But hear this before you go. An edge this keen has a hidden weakness. A blade that is only hard and only sharp is brittle. Meet real resistance, real force, real impact. And an edge like that does not bend. It chips, it snaps. There is one thing left. The thing that lets a blade hold its hardness and its edge and still give just enough to survive the blow instead of shattering under it. The art of being hard and flexible at the same time. That is the temper. And that is where we go next. The blade is hard now, and sharp, sharper than it has ever been. Hard enough to hold that edge for a lifetime. By every measure that matters, it looks finished, perfect, deadly. And then the mastersmith does something that looks like madness. He takes the blade he has spent days perfecting, and he puts it back into the fire, not to reshape it, not to sharpen it. He seems, to anyone watching, to be undoing his own work, softening the very thing he worked so hard to make hard. But here is what the smith knows, and the onlooker does not. That perfect, razor-hard blade has a secret. Strike it against something solid, bone, armor, another blade, and it will not bend. It will do something far worse. It will shatter, like glass. So here is the question. Why does the hardest, sharpest blade shatter, while a slightly softer one survives? And why is the final step of forging a weapon to deliberately weaken it? Don't answer yet. Rome is about to answer it for you. 2,000 years ago, in the dying days of the Roman Republic, there lived a man made of iron. His name was Cato. And in an age drowning in corruption, bribery, and compromise, Cato was something almost unheard of. He could not be bought, he could not be flattered, he could not be frightened, he could not be moved. While other senators took bribes, Cato refused even legal gifts. While Rome softened into luxury, he walked barefoot, wore the plainest clothes, ate the simplest food, on purpose. He trained himself deliberately to need nothing, so that no one could ever offer him anything. He was the fixed point in a turning world. The one man in Rome that everyone agreed could not be corrupted, and they were right. Cato was harder than any man of his age. He was the quenched blade, perfect, gleaming, unbending. And that, it turned out, was exactly the problem. Because here is the thing about a man who will not bend. He will not bend for corruption. Good. But he will not bend for anything else either. Not for compromise, not for strategy, not for the deal that might have saved everything. Rome was sliding towards civil war, Caesar on one side, the Republic on the other, and holding it together would have required exactly what Cato did not possess. The willingness to give a little, to yield on the small thing to protect the large one, to bend so as not to break. Cato would not. Every compromise that might have kept the peace, he blocked. Every deal, he refused. And some historians, carefully because this is debated, argue that the most rigid, most principled man in Rome may have helped push the republic he loved over the edge, precisely because he could not bend to save it. His virtue was real. His integrity was total. But there is a question hiding underneath all that iron. Is a thing that cannot bend truly the strongest thing in the room? The end came in a town called Utica, in North Africa. The war was lost. Caesar had won, the Republic was finished, and Caesar, who liked to be merciful, wanted nothing more than to pardon Cato, to forgive him publicly, to be seen sparing his greatest enemy. For most men, that would have been salvation. For Cato, it was the one thing he could not allow, because to accept Caesar's mercy would be to accept that Caesar had the right to grant it, to bless the very tyranny he had spent his life opposing. He would not bend, not even to survive. The ancient accounts tell us how he spent that last night. Calmly, almost gently. And there is one detail in them that breaks your heart a little. That evening, at dinner, he talked with his friends about philosophy, warmly, even cheerfully. He made sure the people he loved were provided for. He worried about their safety, not his own. This was not a cold man. That is the thing we get wrong about him. He loved deeply. He simply could not bend, not even for love, not even for his own life. He read, of all things, a dialogue of Plato, the one about the soul and whether death is truly the end. He read it through, and then, they say, he read it again. He spoke with friends. He went to sleep, and then, in the dark, he took his own sword and turned it on himself. The wound did not kill him at once. A physician was called and tried to bind it to save him. And Cato, this is the detail that has echoed for 2,000 years, when he woke and found himself being rescued, tore the wound back open. He would not be saved. He would not be pardoned. He would not, in the end, bend one single inch. Sit with that. The most incorruptible man in Rome. So hard that he would rather shatter completely than yield even to survive. There is something magnificent in it, and something terrible. So let us go back to the forge, to the perfect, hard, brittle blade, because now we can name exactly what Cato was. He was the untempered blade, hardened by discipline, quenched by principle, ground to a perfect edge, and missing the one final step that turns a hard blade into a strong one. Here is what tempering actually does. The smith reheats the finished blade, gently, carefully, and something invisible happens inside the steel. A quenched blade is full of hidden tension, locked in stress, frozen into the metal by the shock of the cold, trapped there, waiting, and that trapped stress is exactly what makes it shatter. Tempering releases it. It lets the tension out. It trades away a little of the blade's extreme hardness, in exchange for something far more valuable, the ability to take a blow and bend instead of break. The tempered blade is slightly softer than the quenched one, and it is vastly, immeasurably stronger because it survives. Cato had everything the forge could give, except this. He never let the tension out. He never learned to bend. And so, when the hardest blow finally came, he did the only thing an untempered blade can do. Now come forward to us, because we have fallen in love with Cato's mistake. We admire the man who never bends, who never compromises, who never backs down, unbreakable. We say it like it is the highest compliment there is. We build our whole idea of strength around rigidity, the jaw that never softens, the position that never moves, the grudge that never forgives. But look at what actually survives in the real world. The engineers already know the truth, and it is the opposite of what we believe. The tallest towers ever built are not rigid. They are designed to sway. In a high wind, in an earthquake, a skyscraper that stood perfectly stiff would snap at its base and fall. So engineers build them to move, to flex, to bend several feet at the top and spring back. The buildings that survive the earthquake are not the hardest ones. They are the ones that know how to bend. And you have watched this play out in people too, even if you never named it. The father and the son who have not spoken in 10 years because neither would be the first to bend. The friendship that survived every real hardship, and then shattered over one argument where nobody would give an inch. Not destroyed by the size of the blow, destroyed by the refusal to flex under it. Rigidity is not strength. Rigidity is the thing that fails. Suddenly, completely, and all at once. The person who cannot bend, who cannot forgive, cannot adapt, cannot yield on anything, whose whole identity is, "I never break," is not unbreakable. They are simply one hard blow away from finding out they were brittle the whole time. So let us go back to the question, why does the finished blade go back into the fire? And why does the hardest one shatter? Here it is. Hardness without temper is not strength. It is brittleness wearing a disguise. The final act of forging is not adding more hardness. It is adding the capacity to bend. The smith reheats the blade to release everything it has locked inside, all the frozen tension, all the trapped stress from the fire and the hammer and the quench, and trades a sliver of its hardness for the power to endure a real blow. And here is the truth that Cato, for all his greatness, never grasped. Unbendable and unbreakable are not the same thing. They are opposites. The unbendable blade, the one that will not give an inch, shatters the first time the world strikes it hard enough. The blade that bends is the one that cannot be broken. Cato was unbendable, and so, in the end, he broke. The goal of the forge was never to make you rigid, never to make you a man who cannot yield. The goal was to give you an iron core and the temper to bend around it, to hold your principles like steel and still absorb the blow, to take the hit, flex, and spring back, instead of snapping in half, trying to prove you never move. That is the strength almost no one understands, not the refusal to bend, the ability to bend and not break. The blade comes out of the fire one last time. It has changed. A shade of its mirror brightness traded away, a whisper of its hardness gone, and in exchange, it has become the thing it was always meant to be. Strike it now against bone, against iron, against the full force of the world. And it does not shatter. It bends. It holds. It springs back. Unbreakable. Not because it cannot move, but because it can. The fire made you willing. The hammer made you a shape. The quench made you hard. The edge made you sharp. And the temper made you strong enough to survive being all of those things. There is nothing left to add now. The steel is finished, hard and sharp and tough, able to hold an edge and able to take a blow and able to endure. Everything the fire began is complete. All that remains is the reason any of it was ever done. To be drawn, to be used, to meet the world it was made for and to cut. That is the blade, and that is where we go. For the last time, next. You were never meant to be finished. That is the secret this whole series has been building to, and it is going to sound like a threat. For 5 stages, we have been making a blade. The fire that softened it, the hammer that shaped it, the quench that set it, the edge that sharpened it, the temper that taught it to bend without breaking. And now, at last, it is finished. It hangs on the wall of the forge, perfect, complete, gleaming in the firelight. And here is the strange thing almost no one admits. A finished blade on a wall is worth nothing. All that fire, all those blows, all that patience. For what? Not to be admired, not to be kept safe, not to hang, untouched, where nothing can ever damage it. A blade exists for one reason only, to be drawn and used, and to meet the very thing it was built to face. So the last question of all is this: what was any of it for? The fire, the hammer, all of it, if the blade only ever hangs there, safe? And why does a finished blade, left unused, not stay finished, but quietly begin to die? For that, we need a man who was forged by every stage you have just witnessed, and then handed the heaviest burden in the world and told, "Now, use it, hold that. This is the last time. Let us earn it together." Marcus Aurelius did not want to be emperor. Sit with that, because it is the opposite of almost every ruler in history. He was a quiet man, a student of philosophy. He would have been happiest with his books, his teachers, and a life of the mind. And instead, fate placed on his shoulders the single heaviest responsibility on earth. Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man alive. Here was a blade that had been forged with extraordinary care, schooled in Stoicism from his youth, disciplined, refined, tempered, and now the hand closed around it and drew it and pointed it at the world. He did not get to choose an easy world to be used in. He got war on the frontier that lasted most of his reign. He got a plague that swept the empire and killed, by some estimates, millions. He got betrayal, even at one point, a trusted general who declared himself emperor against him. He got the deaths of most of his children. This was not a blade hung safely on a wall. This was a blade drawn and swung and battered for 20 years against the hardest world imaginable. And here is where the story becomes something almost unbearably human. Because at night, in a military tent, on a freezing frontier, with an empire's weight on his back, Marcus Aurelius did something no one asked him to do. He wrote to himself. Not speeches, not laws, not letters to be read by anyone, a private journal, reminders, arguments with his own weakness. A man trying in the dark to talk himself into being good for one more day. He never intended a single other person to read it. We were never supposed to see these words, and that is exactly why they are the most trusted words in all of philosophy. Because you cannot pose for a diary, you will burn. There is no audience, no performance, no image to protect. Just a tired, powerful, frightened man reminding himself of what the fire had taught him. That the obstacle is the way. That you do not control what happens, only what you do with it. That people will be difficult, and that this is no reason to become difficult yourself. That very soon he would be dead, like everyone before him, and the only question was whether he had been good. The most powerful man in the world, using philosophy not to win arguments, but simply to survive his own life. There is a moment that captures the whole of him. We have his private notes from the war years, the ones we now call the Meditations. And in the middle of history's most famous book on strength, you find him doing something extraordinary, encouraging himself, gently, like a man talking to a friend who is close to giving up. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, he writes, in effect, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being. Think about who is writing that. Not a beginner, not a struggling student, the Emperor of Rome, the most disciplined man of his age, 20 years into ruling the world. And he still had to talk himself out of bed in the morning. He was not writing from a mountaintop, finished and perfect. He was in the fight, every single day, still choosing, still forging himself right up to the end. That is what a drawn blade actually looks like. Not flawless, not effortless, nicked, scarred, bloodied, and still swinging. Still, after everything, choosing to be good, on a frozen frontier in a dying body with no one watching. So let us say plainly what the whole forge was for. Not to make you hard for its own sake, not to make you sharp so you could admire your own edge, not to make you tough so you could tell people how tough you are. The entire point of a blade is use. The fire, the hammer, the quench, the edge, the temper, every stage of suffering and discipline and refinement was never the destination. It was preparation. Preparation for the day the hand closes around you and draws you, and points you at a world that will not go easy. And here is the part we get wrong. We think the goal is to reach some finished state, to be, one day, done, complete, safe, beyond testing. But Marcus, the finished blade, the forged emperor, was still writing in his journal at night, still dragging himself out of bed, still choosing, still fighting, until the day he died. The blade is never hung on the wall. There is no arrival. There is only the drawing and the using and the choosing, again and again, for as long as you live. That is not a burden. That is the entire point. Now come forward one last time to us, because we have quietly inverted the whole thing. We treat the forging as the enemy, the struggle as a problem to be solved, the goal as a life so smooth, so comfortable, so safe, that we never have to be tested at all. We are trying, with everything we have, to become blades that never leave the wall, protected, unused, gleaming, and utterly pointless, because a life arranged so that you are never drawn, never challenged, never asked to cut through anything hard, is not a life that has been kept safe. It is a blade that never found out what it was for. And here is the part that should genuinely disturb you, because it is not a metaphor, it is a physical fact. Ask any violinist what happens to an instrument that stops being played. It does not simply sit there, preserved, waiting. It goes to sleep. The wood stiffens, the resonance dulls. The voice that took decades to develop quietly closes. They will tell you a great instrument left silent for years has to be played back into life, slowly, patiently, until the wood remembers how to sing. The playing was never wearing it out. The playing was what kept it alive. Steel is no different. Left in the scabbard, in the damp and the dark, untouched, it does not stay pristine. It rusts. It seizes. It forgets its edge. The blade on the wall is not being protected. It is being slowly, silently killed by the safety. And deep down, you already know this. You have felt most alive, not in your easiest seasons, but in the ones where you were used, tested, needed, and pushed against something that mattered. That is not a coincidence. You were forged for it. Every hard thing you have survived was not the universe getting in the way of your life. It was the universe making the blade. The only question that was ever real is the one Marcus asked himself in the dark every single night. Now that you have been forged, what are you going to cut? So here is the answer at the end of all of it. Go back to the very beginning, to the first episode, to the fire. We asked back then, what if the worst season of your life was not happening to you, but for you? Now you can see the whole shape. The fire was not punishment. It was the beginning of a blade. The hammer was not cruelty. It was your shape being decided. The quench was not the end. It was the moment your hardness was set. The edge was not wasted, boring effort. It was the patient making of something that could finally cut. And the temper was not weakness. It was the strength to bend and survive and endure. Every stage you cursed while you were inside it was building the exact instrument you would need for the life you were actually going to live. You are not the person the easy road would have made. You are something the fire made. And the hammer, and the cold, and the stone, and the flame a second time. And now you can answer the question we opened with. Why does a finished blade left unused quietly begin to die? Because a blade is not a thing. It is an act. It does not exist in the steel. It exists in the cutting. Hardness, edge, temper. None of it is worth anything hanging in the dark. A blade only is a blade. In the half-second it meets resistance and holds, which means the forging was never building a finished object to admire. It was building a capacity, one that only exists while it is being used. and quietly dissolves the moment you stop. You were never meant to arrive. You were meant to be drawn. The blade is finished, and now, at last, it is being used. Marcus Aurelius died on a frontier, still at his post, still writing, still choosing. The blade never went back on the wall. And when he was gone, the words he never meant anyone to read outlived the empire he carried, outlived the plague that scarred it, outlived almost everything else the ancient world ever made, because they were not the words of a comfortable man. They were the words of a blade that had been used. So this is the last thing the forge has to say to you. You were placed in the fire for a reason. You were struck for a reason. You were plunged into the cold and ground against the stone and bent until you thought you would break for a reason. Not to be admired, not to be kept safe, but to be ready on the day the world finally draws you, to meet it and to cut clean. Ignis aurum probat. Fire tests gold. It tested you, and look what it made. Now go and be used.